Welcome to the PIO Podcast, a place for all things public information related for police, fire, EMS, and local governments. An open forum to learn, grow, and develop your PIO skills. I am Robert Tornabene, your host of this podcast. I am a public information officer with over 10 years in the field and 27 years of law enforcement background. Each episode, we will explore different aspects of the PIO profession. Join me weekly as we talk about everything public information related. If you would like to contact the show, please email me at thepiopodcast@gmail.com. Tell me how I'm doing, offer suggestions, or suggest a guest. Without any further ado, let's get into this week's episode. Today, we are interviewing Rebekah Mena. Rebekah serves as a Deputy Chief Public Affairs for the District of Columbia's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency. As a member of the agency's Office of Public Affairs, Rebekah oversees the agency's internal and external communications efforts. You can read her entire bio in the notes of today's podcast or connect with Rebekah via her social media accounts, which can be found in today's notes. So let's begin. So let's talk about how you became a public information officer and how did you get being involved in the Department of Homeland Security DC setting?
Yeah, so I actually sort of fell into it by accident, and I really have a non-traditional path into the emergency management world and also kind of the PIO world. I was living in Florida, and I was doing my master's in communication management and public relations, and I was looking for internships while I was doing my master's in DC. I don't know how, but I started with this interest in political and government communications, and I knew DC would be a great place to get that experience. So I found the graduate internship here at HSEMA, interviewed for it, got it, and I came for the summer a couple years back, and it was just for an internship. I had every intention in the world of going back to Florida, and at the end of my program, staffing needs just kind of changed, and they offered me a role with the agency. So packed up my life and I moved to Florida. So I had no intention really of ever being in this role or working here. And to be completely honest, before I came to HCM, I had never heard of the term PIO or Public Information Officer. So it was a total learning curve for me, but I had a little bit of that comms background. So it really helped me kind of transition into the role that I'm in now.
All right, so I'm going to jump into that question then, since you
Sure.
said it fell in, like it was almost accidental in a sense. What was your background education wise then? How did you do that transition into becoming a PIO?
So my undergraduate degree is in forensic psychology from the Florida Institute of Technology. So polar opposite of what I'm doing right now.
Right.
And I realized quickly my last semester of school that I loved my coursework, but it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. So I finished up with my degree because I only had a semester left, and I spent a year working for the state of Florida in Brevard County for the Guardian Ad Litem program, so basically doing social work. And I did that for a year just so that I could figure out kind of what my path was and how to get into the communications world, and decided that my master's was a great first step since I had no real formal education. A couple internships in undergrad and some volunteer work, but that was really it. So my master's was huge for me in doing that, and that was kind of the first step. And then about a year after I started working with the Florida government, I found a digital marketing firm in Florida that was willing to take a chance on me. Despite not really having a whole lot of experience in the field, but working on my master's and a couple kind of volunteer experiences. So that was really my path in. So I worked at a digital marketing firm, and as I finished up my master's program, I decided to come to DC to look for more experience, and I never ended up leaving.
Okay, well that explains it. So, and that's good for those people that have want to make a transition or want to become PIOs that don't necessarily have the traditional communications background or public relations background.
Yeah.
So it's good for them to hear that you came in a little bit more non-traditional method, which is good. And there's hope for me down the line in the future. So Explain your role as a deputy chief for the District of Columbia's Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency.
Yeah, so in my role, I kind of help oversee internal and external communication efforts for the agency. So more specifically, a lot of my role has to do with the media relations side of the public affairs team here. So I work with reporters, kind of fielding their requests, helping provide them with background information, kind of helping them better understand what we do as an agency, and then working with our director, Dr. Christopher Rodriguez, to coordinate his interviews, prep him, make sure his talking points and FAQ sheets are ready to go and that he has all of the information that he needs. And then I also work primarily with our social, so helping get preparedness tips and emergency info out online to our followers and communities that way. And then part of my portfolio is actually now on the flip side, running the agency's internship program. So I work a lot with students and universities, not only in the District of Columbia, but across the country to help promote our program and bring students into the emergency management field.
Awesome. So how many people work out of your office then?
We are a team of 5. The Chief of External Affairs, who's my boss, myself, 2 other folks in our public affairs team, and then we have a graphic designer. So we are a small but mighty team.
Oh, that's still that's still decent sized. There's still a lot of organizations that are one or 2 people or 1 full-time, 1 part-time. So
yeah,
5 is still a good size. So you recently completed the advanced PIO course for FEMA. Tell us about it.
Yeah, it was an incredible learning opportunity. I cannot recommend it enough to anybody that is interested in the PIO world, whether you are new or you are a veteran. I cannot recommend it enough. You're thrown into some exercises where you really have to put your knowledge and then what you are learning in the course to the test. It really helps you understand how to work with other people, and more importantly, it gives you a community. I still have a group text going with 4 people from my cohort, and we talk almost daily, and it's been almost a year and a half since I've been in the course. And we have a Facebook group where we all still keep in contact. So it really kind of teaches you everything and gives you that support group of PIOs, but primarily it focuses on how to run a joint information center and the different aspects of a JIC and what makes a team successful and what doesn't. So it's some of the classroom and education piece, and then it's also throwing you into it and seeing how well you do in a fake real life scenario.
Sometimes sink or swim, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. What's your biggest takeaway from it?
Everybody works differently. We had, and I think it really translates to how a JIC works in real life. We had people from every aspect of life, government communicators, some that are in the public safety realm. We had people that worked with water utility companies, public works PIOs, folks that worked at the military level. We had some Guard and some Army folks. So just kind of learning how to work with everybody with such different backgrounds. And in a real world JIC, if you don't have enough people to staff your JIC, you're going to pull anybody that you can. You're not going to be picky about what type of background someone has. So you don't know, what level of experience someone might have. So it really does simulate kind of what could happen in a real world environment, but it definitely teaches you that interpersonal skills and communication skills are so important despite having any other knowledge that a PIO has.
I agree. You cannot have enough in the interpersonal relationship skills as a PIO. And if you don't have that, you're really going to struggle.
Absolutely.
So social media has become everything for a PIO in a sense. Yeah. And so this kind of a multi-part question. So what are the positives of using social media?
I think that it moves fast, right? It's a really quick and easy way to get information out to people, whether it's Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And I think a lot of the platforms in some ways are adapting to help government agencies get information out faster. For example, like Facebook rolled out the local alert feature, and that's been huge to help us reach people beyond just our followers. So it's fast and it's a quick and easy way to get information out to people.
Okay. And so what's the negatives behind it?
A lot of what I just said. It moves really fast,
Yeah.
and there's little control over what the platforms do. I think one of the biggest issues that communicators in any level, but especially the government realm, face right now is accessibility. And we have no control over how much or how little effort a social media platform puts into their accessibility features. And that's really frustrating when you are trying to get critical life safety information out to residents and you can't control the setup of a platform. So I think that the lack of accessibility, well, I will say that platforms are getting a lot better and there is more focus and effort into the accessibility of social media, but at the end of the day, it's not accessible for every single resident, which poses a challenge for PIOs, which is why it's important to not only rely on social media. You have to have other tools in your toolbox.
Great. That's a great point that you bring up about the accessibility, because I think a lot of agencies, especially in the law enforcement side, have not thought about that accessibility factor. They're getting there slowly, but there are still a large segment of the law enforcement end of it that do not even think of that. I think with the pandemic happening, we've seen the accessibility with the hand with sign language. As part of it, you see now all of a sudden now they've, instead of just doing the closed captioning, they're literally standing right next to whoever the speaker is, which is the way it's supposed to be. But
Absolutely.
there's still a lack of that going on just at a regular press conference, especially the law enforcement side. So great points on that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
So this is the last part of that question. So why do you think there's still agencies, organizations that are reluctant to use it?
I think that there are a lot of reasons why some of them would be reluctant to use it. And I think one of the big things could be just not knowing how it works, or the fact that it's 24/7. Social media is literally 24/7 and there's no way to turn it off. As a PIO or as somebody that manages an agency's accounts, it's nonstop and people are mean. People forget that there's a real human being on the other side of a Twitter account when they're cursing you out, calling you every name under the sun, and it's really, really exhausting. So I think that there are obviously a lot of reasons that people don't do it, but from my experience, I found that people just don't know where to start or how to do it, or they just don't want to deal with all the, BS that comes with it from angry people, and just sometimes getting mixed up with somebody who thinks you're an account or a person that you're not.
Great points. So where do you think that next step is for social media and emergency management? Where do you think that they go? I know there's been a few things that, like, Twitter has talked about control over, that some larger organizations are going to be able to have to take over and send out messaging, but there's still limited availability on that. Where do you think it's going to go from here?
It's really hard to say. And I think 2020 just showed us how important social media and any type of online communication tool is. So I think that if you had asked this a year ago, it would have been totally different than it is now. I think that social media platforms are going to continue to build in features that I think help connect people and bring more people together, because we are still distant and there is still a global pandemic going on. But I think one of the big things that I'm hopeful the pandemic also influenced, which I mentioned earlier, is accessibility. We're seeing a lot of different things kind of start to roll out in terms of alt text for images or making GIFs accessible to screen readers. So I think now that so much of our communication is focused to an online platform, that these accessibility and connectivity issues are going to have to roll out, and that's kind of where platforms are going to have to go, or folks may start to consider other options to kind of reach residents as best as they can.
Great points. Excellent. So as a PIO for your agency, how has it changed since you started? So you've been in this position for how many years now?
About 3.5.
Okay, so from go to day one 3.5 years ago, where's it changed to today?
I feel like there is more that we're dealing with on an ongoing basis. In an emergency management agency, your work is largely dictated by what's going on around you. And in 2020, we are dealing with so many concurrent events. At the beginning of the year, we started out just kind of focusing on the pandemic. Then we rolled into the pandemic and extreme heat for the summer. Then we rolled into the pandemic, extreme heat, and hurricane season. Then we kind of switched gears to flooding, and we had a pretty significant flood in the district in September. And now we're looking at snow, which we're dealing with our very first snowfall in the district today. And now we're also planning for the inauguration, which is, less than 40 days away. So we're managing 5, 6, 7 incidents at a time, where 3.5 years ago, I don't think our team was at that point and had those capabilities built out. We've done a lot of work internally. So I think that my job now is I'm communicating 6, 7 different messages all day long, and having to shift from kind of one focus to the next. So it's challenging, but you just kind of learn to go with it. Sometimes it's like sink or swim. Can you do it? And you do it and you're like, cool, then I can do this again tomorrow because I did it today.
Okay, so you kind of answered my next question about crisis communications. You kind of rolled it. That's perfect, and that's outstanding. And then you kind of rolled into my next one, which was about the pandemic, how it's kind of complicated life as a PIO. Obviously, nobody could have predicted that this was going to happen. Yeah. I do think for PIOs, because pandemics were not something that were talked about at all. I think that's definitely has created, it shows that we're lacking in certain areas, and not necessarily all agencies, but certain ones are lacking. Where do you think that they could have maybe improve on that?
I think the biggest thing, and pandemic or not, if it's any large incident that's this long, right? We're pushing month 10 of this. I think the biggest thing is partnerships. A lot of time, at least in the emergency management world, there's this phrase that you hear nonstop. You never want to meet a person for the first time during an incident. And from an operational perspective, that absolutely makes sense. And they do a really great job of working kind of across agencies, across jurisdictions to get to know each other. I think it's time for, on the flip side, for PIOs to kind of follow that same mantra of knowing who your partners are at the health department, so that you're not calling them for the first time when there's a pandemic and having to figure out, okay, well, who do I go to? What's your role? How do you help me? I think it's really important to kind of build those bridges and those connections early on with everybody, so that somebody in your law enforcement agency, somebody in your public works team, somebody in your water utility company. If there's a boil water or something during a pandemic, like anything could happen. So having those connections and those relationships established early on, I think would be really helpful, because one of the things that we're seeing in the pandemic is that it's truly an all hands on deck approach. From a government perspective, every single person is involved. In the District of Columbia, there are, 30 plus agencies that are working on COVID any given day. And some of those agencies are people that I may not have worked with as a public safety agency on the regular pre-pandemic. So I think having those relationships in place is really, really crucial.
And I'm going to go into a segue here. How are you handling the spacing in your office? So I'm assuming because there's only 5 of you, your office is relatively small. How do you handle that being 6 feet apart, the whole social distancing issue?
Yeah. So as an agency, as a whole, we have, I'd say maybe 50, 60, probably 60% of our agencies on telework status right now. And then we have the other staff that are still here. It's mainly our leadership team, some of our communicators, some of our operational folks, and some of the team that manages our 24/7 watch center. So we have basically just the key specific agencies or positions in the office that we need here. The same thing goes for our communications team. I'm in the office on a daily basis, and so is our chief of external affairs. And then the other 3 members of our team are working remotely. So we coordinate with them on a daily basis, virtually through Teams or WebEx, whatever it is. But we really just have the people in the office that we need to be in the office, so that we can kind of still work on things, and everything else we're really just kind of remotely tying into the other team members.
Have you found that the remote thing has there's things that get lost in translation with the remote versus the person-to-person interaction?
For sure. I mean, email, text message, chats through Teams, things definitely get lost. And I would be the first person to say, I miss having everybody in the office and being able to walk to any person's office and say, hey, I need this. Can you help me? I think that picking up the phone or calling, video call is a little bit easier because you can read body language and, kind of talk it out with people. Written text is hard, but I definitely miss that face-to-face interaction. But I'm thankful that we still have so many tools that at least allow us to be connected, even though we're physically not connected.
Perfect. Outstanding. So for you guys, are you making your own content, like graphics and things like that? Or is that something you farm out?
Yeah, so we pretty much do everything internal. My team, the public affairs team, we pretty much do everything on our own. We do have a graphic designer who is amazing and is the saving grace of our agency. He helps us out with some templates and things like that, but primarily we handle our content creation on our own. So one of the big things that we rely on is Canva, and I feel like any PIO you talk to at this point in the game says Canva is a game changer for them. So we do a lot of our content creation that way, also utilizing some of the Adobe creative tools and applications. But yeah, we do everything in-house right now.
Nice. Yeah, Canva is really nice. And I'm a big Adobe fan, so I use pretty much all their platforms. How about you? What's your go-to app or program besides
Honestly,
Canva?
Besides Canva, I would say, I don't think anything compares to Canva in my mind at this point. Like it's web-based, really it's so great. And we can share things, but I'd say if I'm not using Canva, I'm probably using Adobe Spark as like kind of my next step.
Yeah, that's outstanding program. Absolutely. Great stuff, Rebekah. So what advice do you have for someone who wants to be a PIO, whether it's an emergency service or in public relations position?
I would say that coming into it from a non-traditional background, you can do it. Anybody can do it. If you put the work in and you have the right experience and you have some education and professional stuff to back you up, you can do it. It might be a little bit of a learning curve, but it is an awesome position, and I can't imagine doing anything else with my career at this point. The other thing that I think is to just kind of remember is that it can be hard, and you don't have to do it alone. Even if you're a team of one in an agency, there are hundreds of PIOs across the country that are willing to help you, share ideas, kind of brainstorm with you. The other thing kind of stemming off of that is Twitter is huge. If you are a PIO and you are not on Twitter, you are missing out. We have an amazing PIO fam on Twitter that is always just kind of bouncing ideas off of one another or connecting people with different agencies. So there is a community out there to support you, regardless of if you're a team of 1 or a team of 500.
Great. Here, this will go with it. You're talking about that doing the job and stuff. Is stress and burnout a factor for a PIO?
1,000%. And anybody that tells you otherwise is lying, or they just haven't been in it long enough to realize that it is. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're on 24/7, and it's funny that you bring this up and how timely this is. I was just having kind of a back and forth with people on Twitter this week about the role of the PIO, and it's evolved immensely over the last, year. But the last 5 years, especially because of social media, it is 100% a 24/7 job. The media doesn't stop. Reporters are always going to need things, whether it's 2 a.m., 2 p.m. Social media doesn't stop. It's 24/7. If there's, some incident takes place in the middle of the night, guess who's getting a phone call? The PIO, because they need to be in the loop. They may have to get messaging out. They may have to get on social. So yeah, it's 24/7. And I think in a pandemic, especially, it's really hard. Our teams we used to keep count of, we do a daily PIO call in the district for COVID response, and we used to keep track of what day we're on. And at this point, I can't even tell you, we stopped after 200 something. I don't know where we are. But it's every single day. And even on weekends, there are things that sometimes need to get done. So it's real. And I think it's really important for leadership and managers, especially, to understand that it's a real part of the job, and to encourage their team to talk about mental health and to talk about where they struggle and what they need help with, and to give people the room to have time off. Even if it's just for an afternoon to go kind of debrief, take time to be by yourself. It's really, really important. And I think as PIOs, we should encourage each other to do that, but it's also definitely on the management and leadership level as well.
Great points. Thank you. So what is your favorite social media platform and why?
I put a poll up about this on Twitter the other day. I don't know. I go back and forth. I love Twitter, but the older I get, I don't know if this makes me sound nerdy, but I love LinkedIn. I absolutely love LinkedIn. I don't know what it is about LinkedIn, but I love it. So Twitter and LinkedIn, I'd say, are kind of tied for my top two. Granted, they both have some different kind of purposes, but they're definitely my go-to.
Okay, great. Twitter was always my fan. It's always been it's where I started. But I do agree with you. LinkedIn, definitely, there's something about it that it's especially since the platform has evolved in the last few years, it's definitely made it more user friendly as opposed 100%. To more professional end of it. Yeah. So what kind of training does a PIO need to get for your department specifically? What should they have for you guys?
So because we're an emergency management agency, we rely really heavily on FEMA's training. So FEMA, if anybody listening doesn't know, has independent study courses, which are free, absolutely free and available online. You just have to create an account, student ID through their system, and you can take literally thousands of trainings. They have really, really, really great PIO related trainings. So there are a couple that you need to take, like social media and emergency management. There's a public information awareness course, and taking those kinds of prereqs builds you up for FEMA's Advanced PIO Academy, which is what I took about 1.5 years ago that we were talking about earlier. And it's a week-long training up at Emmitsburg at the National Training Center. So there's a basic PIO course and then the advanced PIO course. And then above that is FEMA's Master PIO course. So I rely really heavily on FEMA's trainings. And then I also think, not sponsored or anything, but I also think the National Information Officer Association is a really great resource for PIOs or communicators of kind of any kind. They offer some really great trainings in a yearly conference as well, that has been really helpful in my position.
They are, and I'm going to actually later in the week, I'm going to actually interview Ashley McDonald as part of
Ashley's my girl. She's the best.
She has been definitely a resource for me in the last couple of months, and
she's wonderful.
She's awesome. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that interview as well.
Fun fact, I actually met Ashley. She was a total stranger to me, but I met her when I was at FEMA's Advanced PIO course because she was doing the master. So I met her even before I knew what NIOA was, all because I was out of training.
There you go. And then you got pulled in, right?
Yeah, they did. They pulled me in quick.
So what is one thing that our listeners can take away from this? And keep in mind, they're all going to be PIOs anyways. What's one takeaway they can take?
I would say you are never in a position where you don't have something to learn. I've been in my role for about 3.5 years now, and I promise you there's something new that I learn every single day. So I think that's a really great part of our job, is that it's always evolving and there's new aspects of it that you can kind of learn and catch up on. And the other thing is, I think, to embrace social media. It's rough. I get it. It's 24/7. And as I mentioned earlier, people are mean. But you just got to kind of put that stuff aside. It's a really, really great tool to use and to have. And I encourage all communicators to embrace it to its fullest.
Awesome. So these are kind of the fun part of this interview. So last book you read?
It's called No, You Shut Up. And it's by Simone Sanders, who is actually now the chief spokesperson for Vice President Kamala Harris.
Oh, okay. I'll have to take a look at that. Awesome.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Awesome. Favorite sport team? Favorite sport and team?
Sport, I tie between football and baseball. Team, 1000% the Philadelphia Eagles. We're having a real crappy season, but I will never not be a fan.
So did you grow up in Philadelphia?
I grew up in New Jersey,
okay.
South Jersey though, so about an hour outside of Philadelphia. So we are definitely Philly fans in my household.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, hey, we're coming right into the holidays here in the next couple of weeks. In the next week, what's your must-have comfort food for the holidays?
Cookies. I spent, no joke, probably 12 hours baking this weekend, making cookie tins for senior leadership team here at work. So cookies, 100%.
I used to love when I used to live at home and my mom would have the entire island covered with cookies, and just watching.
I was running a home bakery this weekend.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's the one thing I do. I don't eat a whole lot of cookies. I got a food allergy. I can't have them anymore, so it's very tough. The ones that I can't eat, they're like chewing on cardboard.
Yeah, I know.
So it's not the greatest thing. But when I watch people have those cookie trays, I just want to devour them all. Awesome. So Ashley, that completes the interview. Thank you.
It's okay. I thought you said actually, so we're good.
Anything else you want to say?
No, I just wanted to thank you for inviting me on. I'm so excited that this is a resource that PIOs will have, and I'm excited to see what the other interviews include.
Yep, we're going to have Ashley on the next one, and then I have Mike Pruitt. I don't know if you know Mike.
Yeah.
Mike is a deputy chief for the fire department in Indiana. He's going to be coming on. So, and I'm just going to keep going through different people, and then I figure I'm going to do individual interviews, or I should say, me speaking about like things that you should be doing as a PIO, like a strategic plan and so on, and maybe look at some of the training that's out there and kind of highlighting the training that PIO should be getting.
There are definitely a lot of trainings out there, so that is awesome to hear.
Great. All right, Rebekah, I appreciate it. You have a safe and happy holiday. Try and be careful out there with the snow.
Yes. Thank you. You as well. I appreciate it. Thank you again for having me.
All right. Have a good one. Take care.
You too. We'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye. And that is it for our show today. We will be interviewing Ashley McDonald, the president of the National Information Officers Association. So we look forward to that interview. And again, thank you very much, Rebekah Mena from DC Homeland Security and Emergency Management Agency, for coming on and speaking to us today. Well, that is the end of this podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. Check back next week as we interview Ashley McDonald, president of the National Information Officers Association. Please share this podcast to help us grow. We appreciate you listening. Please leave us a comment on our Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube channel. Tell us how we're doing, or you can email us at thepiopodcast@gmail.com. Until next week, be safe.